喂，你今日飲咗未啊？
飲 orange juice？
青紅蘿蔔豬骨湯
Coffee or tea or me？
飲橙汁？不如試下飲 Coffee Bubble Tea 啦。Welcome and thanks for joining us today on the Coffee Bubble Tea Podcast. Today, I, Joyce, will be your host, and I have here with me Samson, Tiffany, Colin, and a special guest. So our special guest for today is my dear cousin, Chloe. Chloe, would you care to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Chloe. I grew up in Hong Kong, and I came to Canada when I was 14 to study in a boarding school, and I'm currently studying in grade 10.
So today we're going to be talking about the movie that recently came out, Turning Red. This was released in March 2022, directed by Domi Shi. And in this film, it features 13-year-old Mei, a Chinese-Canadian girl growing up in Toronto, who suddenly realizes she has a red panda inside of her. And she turns into this red panda when she is emotionally stimulated, and the only way she can kind of come out of this red panda is when she feels relaxed and calm. And this is often when she's thinking about her friends. Turns out that this red panda is an inheritance. It comes, it's through all the females in her, like her mom, her grandma, her aunts. They all experience this, and they go through a really cool process to capture this red panda and trap it, and they carry it around in a charm or pendant with them.
我啱啱覺得我睇咗，我再睇一次睇翻套戲，啱啱 Joyce 嗰1分鐘佢就已經講出成套戲。佢喺度講，跟住咧啲畫面就喺度腦度，我啱啱咪睇完一次啊。
So, I had the really cool opportunity to watch the movie with my family, and so we gathered for hot pot, and in the afternoon we put on the film. There was myself, my cousin Chloe, my mom, my aunt, my brother, his girlfriend, my husband, my daughter, and we just all gathered in the living room and watched it. And by the end of the film, my aunt turned to us and asked us, "Was that your experience growing up?" And none of us could really say, yeah, it was. And it got me thinking, you know, it's great that we're starting to get representation of Chinese Canadians, of Canadian culture, of what it means to grow up with different values from your parents' generation. But it didn't have to represent everybody. And I was comfortable with that. But yeah, I think it got us thinking, like, how can we explore a bit more about our relationships with our family, with our parents, because this film really highlighted just the pressure that Mei felt to please her parents. And with the strong cultural heritage of filial piety, of being house son, how do we continue to live that out, but also not lose ourselves in the process?
頭先個問題咧，即係你話你 Aunt 問你咧 I think I wish we had that conversation when I was growing up. Yeah.
Can you tell me more?
好少傾，即係傾心事嘅同父母。
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Colin, what do you mean by that?
I think it's just that we don't really have that deep level of conversation in my household. So in terms of really wanting to talk about it, you almost have to like dig. And sometimes that may work, sometimes that might not work. So yeah.
Yeah.
但係同你爹哋同媽咪都係咁樣定係即係
My mom is a little bit more open. My dad is a little more reserved. So I think it really depends on the topic. If it's something they want to hear, then we'll continue the conversation. If it's something that they don't want to hear, then they probably won't want to talk about it more.
How about yourself, Chloe? Do you get to talk about this stuff with your parents?
In terms of like feelings and how we feel, like sometimes if I feel like, oh, you know, I don't like something, like for example, my mom did something and that I don't like, I would like express my feeling towards, like it'd be like, you know, maybe you should try something else. I don't know.
How about yourself, Tiffany?
可能因為我哋兩姊妹都係女仔，所以真係同媽咪 close 啲嘅。咁爹哋係真係比較少會講心事，但係即係我諗由細個開始，媽咪俾我哋嘅感覺就係 friend 咯，即係佢真係會同我哋講，佢係會 share 佢嘅嘢。我哋亦都即係因為佢肯去 share 嘅時候，即係其實好多嘢都係雙方面啦。即係我哋又會肯去 share 我哋嘅嘢咯。到而家其實即係大個啲咧，而家我哋大個咗之後，其實都真係好都會肯去同佢講一啲比較內心嘅嘢咯。都即係我覺得成個可能我媽咪嗰個 take 嗰個 approach 係佢唔係真係以媽咪嗰個角色去問我哋，係咪佢真係話你有咩想講啊，講俾我聽啦咁樣，即係一個 friend 嘅角色啊。咁所以我都覺得我喺呢方面都OK 嘅，即係都 feel lucky 我有呢個機會去有同佢講呢啲嘢。
I think you bring up a really good point about how gender and family members actually intersect. I think I recall once reading that mothers and daughters share the closest relationship, followed by mothers and sons, then fathers and daughters, and fathers and sons. And that's not to say fathers and sons can't have those relationships, but I think it takes a lot of extra effort in order to bridge that emotional realm together. So definitely we'll get back to this a little later. I'm really curious to ask, what were your relationships like with your parents growing up? And how did they raise you? How did they treat you? What were you grateful for? What might you have wished for?
So my upbringing, my parents were born in Hong Kong. I was born here in Ontario. I think my upbringing was pretty good for the most part. I'm really grateful and entirely grateful for my parents in my life. I guess in my household, they weren't exactly most open, like verbally, but I think they just demonstrated by action. So they taught me everything, like tried to look out for me, protect me from everything that they could. Kind of like how in the movie, the mother is protecting her daughter or trying to protect her daughter from everything, like all the outside influences, all the evils of the world that she felt she needed to do. In a way, that was kind of like my parents, but not as extreme, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Did anyone's mom ever show up at school with a box of tampons? Because that was so cringe. Like, I felt like this character was like overbearing to the nth degree, and like, oh my gosh, like there was so much that she did that make me feel so cringe. Like, I remember that moment, and I personally have never had that. Like, my parents were not ever like that, but certainly I think I can certainly see that in some parents. Like, a mother would probably, regardless of whatever reaction other people have, would do the utmost for their child, despite any sort of criticisms they may receive. Yeah.
So I can totally see how that could play out. Maybe it is exaggerated quite a bit, obviously, for a movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. How about yourself, Chloe? What is growing up with your parents like?
Since I was like an only child, right? They gave me like a lot of attention. And because I had eczema, my mom had to like quit her job when I was young to like kind of take care of me. Something that I kind of like wish for my parents is that I kind of wish they were more open to newer things. Like, for example, both my parents are pretty traditional, even though my mom's a bit more open. But my dad is like stuff that's normalized in my generation right now. Like, for example, I don't know, like dating in high school or that kind of stuff. It's normalized right now, but it wasn't when they were 15. You know, and they would always look at my generation the same as how they looked at theirs. So there's like the same point of view.
It seems like the males always seem to be the ones that are more guarding their emotions. Just in hearing everyone's like stories and sharing. I wonder why that is. That's interesting to me.
Samson, do you want to enlighten us on that?
You saw me smile, right? 我頭先諗起咧 I never dated in high school, but I dated in 小學。
He was already like a guy that was
in high school. It got more complicated, maybe more competition. But in 小學 it was very simple thing. You know, oh, I like you. You know, things like that. And
I wish that worked for me.
What was the point of your question? 我唔記得頭先傾到咩。
佢就記得佢小學嘅嗰段 puppy love。
Just how your parents raised you, what they were like, what you were grateful for, what you wished for.
Yeah, 即係諗teaching me how to cook. Yeah, not actually teach, but involving me 切嘢啊，跟住 eventually 又炒下嘢啊咁樣。I guess 我可能即係我多啲時間去諗呢樣嘢。It was a life skill, but it was also 係一種享受嚟嘅。Yeah, it was more than just survival. 影響好深啊。Yeah, to me.
Was it your mom who cooked or dad?
No, my dad.
Your dad cooked.
Yeah, and it was pretty funny because eventually after we graduated, and then there was a period when my dad was in Shanghai or somewhere in China, and my mom was in Hong Kong, and my mom had to cook. She had to sort of learn cooking herself, and I try to give good comments.
大家聽住 I try to give good comments.
It sounds very effortful.
但係都其實即係 OK 嘅啲嘢食，但係幾有趣就係my dad and mom is really 好唔同嘅，其實佢哋都。Yeah.
Wow. How about you, Tiff? What were your parents like while you were growing up?
頭先都講過，即係媽咪就即係好朋友咁樣啦。爹哋咧，我覺得係比較權威性多啲，即係我覺得佢係其實我到而家咁大個咧，我有陣時咧都會喺某啲位咧好驚同爹哋講嘢嘅，即係我覺得死啦，我唔知佢會點答我唔識點樣答翻佢嗰下，因為即係始終爹哋個 figure， 即係佢個 figure 真係好爹哋，所以我覺得有啲驚啊，到而家都仲係會有啲位咁樣，即係反而媽咪你就會 feel more comfortable 去同佢講啦。咁亦都可能因為即係就算以前媽咪都係即係佢兩個都要翻工啦，咁我同我妹就即係自己我哋以前即係香港就會有姐姐幫手湊我哋啊咁樣，咁但係都即係媽咪就會比起爹哋多啲時間去陪我哋，咁所以可能 that's why 亦都頭先阿 Joyce 講到，即係 mother daughter 嘅 relationship 會好啲咁樣，咁所以同爹哋係即係始終都會覺得有少少 distance 嘅，咁但係同埋係可能即係 traditional 嘅關係啦，係咪？我都覺得爹哋係比較諗嘢可能係傳統少少啊，或者係古板少少，冇咁 open mind 嘅。咁所以其實就會好多位就係覺得點解你唔 get 我哋嘅，或者係點解你會咁古板嘅咁樣諗嘢咁樣。咁所以其實都幾搞笑我覺得。咁係到我哋大個，可能即係即係都 come to realize 係佢兩個女大個啦。佢其實反而而家係即係好多位係，雖然我都會有時都有啲同爹哋講嘢嘅時候有啲驚啊、少怯啊咁樣咧，但係即係我唔係話我好驚佢嗰種我少少唔係好知道點樣去，好似即仲係有少少去 distance 啦，但係我覺得係好少嘅啫，比起以前細個。咁而家咧佢就會聽你會發覺其實佢真係會好耐心地聽我哋兩個講嘢咯。即係我哋會可能分析啲嘢俾佢哋聽，解釋俾佢哋聽點解會咁樣啊咁樣，即係可能 which is 以前細個即係同一件事，以前細個就會覺得喂你哋錯啊，你哋唔啱啊，點啊，但係而家佢真係會去 聽我哋去講咯。咁我覺得呢個係嗰個即刻嘅 changes 啦，同埋係我哋同即係咯同爹哋嘅媽咪嘅 relationship 啦。我都覺得我爹哋媽咪冇 push 我嘅，即係我就係嗰啲咧成績唔好嗰啲人嚟嘅。咁我由細到大即係我諗我 parents 都 come to realize 呢個女讀書唔係好得嘅，所以咧佢從來冇 push 過我去話啊你一定要攞幾多分啊，嘅佢啦啊，甚至即係其實我好記得嗰陣時香港中學嘅時候咧，佢都有講過佢話你升到班就得噶啦，你唔需要好慘，你升到班就得噶啦，你唔需要去攞高分，因為可能佢都知我嘅性格就唔係嗰啲好叻讀書啊咁樣，但係可能我就係比較more叻做嘢可能會 pick up 得快啲啊嗰啲，然之後你不停咁灌啲攞嚟坐我個腦度咧，我係唔得嘅，我會癲嘅咁樣嗰啲。即係尤其是我諗香港嘅嗰種到而家都係咧，應該係就係香港嗰種所謂嘅填鴨式教育咧，係唔係好適合我嘅。我係即係我係反而真係過到嚟加拿大讀 high school 嘅時候咧，先覺得哇呢個先係真正我，即係我先可以係讀書，我先至可以攞高分咯嘅嗰種。咁所以即係我同我妹就係呢個 difference，所以我妹讀書係好叻，我妹佢係 push 佢自己 push 得好勁咁樣，但係我係第一我 push 唔到我自己，第二我都知我 parents 唔會 push 我咯。咁同埋我都好即係我諗係亦都因為我爹哋媽咪做嘢嘅緣故啊，佢哋嘅即係嗰陣時嘅工作啦，其實我覺得我好慶幸就係我有去，我覺得我個眼界上都闊嘅，即係相比起可能同一齊成長嘅 background 差唔多一樣喺香港讀書啊嘅朋友咧，我覺得我睇嘅嘢可能會比佢哋多少少，因為可能媽咪係會因為媽咪以前佢嗰份工作係需要去嗰啲叫做出差，咁其實咧佢只要如果佢係出差去中國內地嘅話咧，佢可以帶到我哋咧，咁我哋啲時間又可以同佢 match， 其實佢係可以帶我哋出去一齊去嘅咁樣，咁所以即係我覺得其實呢啲咁樣嘅嘢就係你由細去 build up 你點樣去你個眼界去睇多啲啊，咁所以我覺得係即係好慶幸，即係我媽咪佢有咁樣去 bring up 我哋咯，細個嘅時候。
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Like I think about the moment in the film when Mei's dad opens up the camcorder and sees how happy Mei is as her red panda. And he has this moment. I mean, throughout he's always been kind and gentle and supportive, but there was this moment where you could see his complete acceptance of who she was when he said, you know, maybe she doesn't need to lock herself up because I haven't seen my daughter so happy. And yeah, like I think for the dads kind of as they've been described right now, there's this sense that, you know, they might be more traditional and they might have higher expectations. But some of you have mentioned that your parents didn't really push you. And I'm wondering, you know, was that a function of their personality? Was that because you guys ever pushed back on them? I don't know why and how do you feel that has given you freedom to become who you are today? And I ask this because I think there's a lot of parents out there who feel like without my intervention, my child will fail. Without my intervention, they will not be motivated to succeed. And sometimes I think the reverse of that is actually true.
我覺得我 parents 由細到大都冇話去真係好管我哋話你一定要行我 plan 呢條路，點，即係我覺得佢哋係 more like 去 nurture 即係佢哋係佢哋會係托住我哋咯，但係佢唔係真係去包實我哋咯。我覺得即係如果我要咁樣形容，咁所以我相信即係每一個家長都好唔同，每一個成長嘅人嘅 background 都好唔同，但係係咯，我 parents 就係咁樣咯。咁我亦都好 grateful for 佢哋嘅呢一種方式咯，即係我相信我都係嗰啲，你冇逼我啊，你逼我好癲㗎，你逼我啊，我打你啊，係咯，即係我都係即係 你睇你阿媽就吐咗出嚟，所以阿媽一定知你諗咩嗰啲啦。所以我覺得我阿媽係都幾 understand 我同我妹嘅性格咯，即係佢都知我佢兩個女係唔逼得嘅，係會我哋真係會逼我唔理你。
Yeah. So in a sense, they didn't really push you because they knew there's no point.
係啊，佢都 push 唔到啊，因為讀書太差噶啦，你點啊？唔得喎，我真係做唔到啊咁樣。咁佢真係會，我諗佢可能都知道，即係你咁樣會弄巧反拙，你繼續 push 佢都冇用。
Yeah.
佢只會去咗另外一個side，佢可能係唔好咁樣，佢都無謂去令到呢樣嘢發生咯。我覺得。
How about for you, Samson? You also mentioned your parents didn't really push you, and you kind of you appreciated it, but you
有次咧，我記得我成日我阿媽睇好多書嘅，睇小説。咁呢個我 pick up from 阿媽，咁我都好開心。跟住咧有次咧，我哋兩個都喺度睇書啦。跟住佢話：我係咪要叫你做嘢咧？其實，跟住我都唔記得點答，總之我哋繼續睇書。
Was that when you were very young or?
No, grade 9, grade 10.
Okay, yeah. Just finding your moments to be able to relax together.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That actually leads into one of my questions, how, sometimes the relationship between parents is that children are seen as a narcissistic extension of their parents. And what I couldn't do as a child, I want you to accomplish. Who I couldn't be, I want you to become. My sense is that wasn't exactly what you guys experienced growing up, but have you observed any of that, or maybe it does resonate with you?
So my parents never really had that sort of mindset. Like they never really said that, when I couldn't accomplish, I want you to accomplish for me, right? So they never really had that sort of limitation for me. That just kind of let me explore my own path, like just to try and see if it would work out for me. And if it didn't, then I would just kind of find my own way, I guess. So they never really had that expectation for me. I think though, what's interesting now that I think about it is that I kind of have that own expectation of myself that I need to do something for my parents, even though they never had that kind of expectation. So it was kind of like the reverse almost. I don't know how that happened, but it just happened, I guess. Yeah.
我覺得佢哋可能諗過，因為我其實我唔 realize 我咁記得。There are several moments. Once when I was very young, I asked my dad, 爸爸，我第時唔想做旅行社啊咁樣。跟住 and then he was 即係佢都冇諗過。點解旅行社啊？係咪做旅行社？哦。I don't know where I got that idea from. 即係 you have to do whatever. 即係係咯 ，your dad is a farmer. 即係繼承衣缽。Yeah. 跟住 another moment was 佢有一次咧就話我哋呢即係個 extended family 會唔會出一個科學家咧咁樣？跟住I thought that's a stupid idea。咁樣係啦，即係somehow I remember this， 即係佢真係講過一次咋，所以可能these kinds of things stick in your mind， 即係可能 did I see it as a pressure or something？ Well, I'm not a scientist。咁樣係咯，跟住到好大個，即係佢哋翻咗香港，跟住有次翻嚟。咁嗰陣時我係啱啱未入 U 啦，定係入咗 U 第一年，跟住佢突然間，即係佢 somehow 咧，佢可能以為我係想讀音樂嘅，跟住咧佢就話其實讀音樂都 OK 嘅咁樣，即係我就 feel 到，咦佢好似 accept 我嘅 interest， 咁但係我即刻覆，咦其實我而家唔係想讀音樂，咁係咯，突然間即係 parents' expectation. Somehow I really remember these moments. Yeah.
That's really fascinating how you bring up the career thing. my mother trained to be an English teacher in university. I also trained to be an English teacher in university. My father studied computer science and worked as a systems analyst. My brother also studied computer science and became a programmer, but it was never asked of us. And I think we have I've taken on different routes. My mom later trained to work with special needs kids. I now work with special needs kids. So it is interesting. Haven't given that as much thought. But yeah, what about you, Chloe, in terms of how do you handle your parents' expectations?
Obviously in future career paths, I think my dad has told me multiple times that he would like me to be just any career, but professionally. He wants me to be a professional in something, for example, engineer or doctor or a lawyer or something like that. So that's that. But he didn't really say he didn't really he just says you just need to be a professional in something. You need to be focused on one thing as your main career.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what
Can I ask why do you think that is the case? Have you ever questioned why he would want you to be a professional and maybe not explore other career opportunities? Because that's a pretty standard parental kind of expectation, at least in our Asian
culture,
in our culture. Yeah. So have you ever given that much of a thought?
I think he wants me to have a stable job, make a living for myself in the future, because my dad thinks that stuff for example work volunteering at a shelter or something, he might think that job is not really that stable, and I feel what he wants for me is for me to make a good amount of income and then have a good life on my own,
Yeah, I think he's hoping that through his expectations you will reach some level of success and independence in your life. Yeah. Speaking about expectations, my mom never really set career expectations for me, and I remember every year in undergrad, during the fall, I would get super anxious about what I was doing with my life and what I would do in the future. And I would always ask her oh, I don't know, should I study this? Should I study that? And she'd be like, it's your choice. It's your choice. And I think maybe towards the latter years, I finally asked her, well, Mom, why weren't you ever like those Chinese parents who told their kids what to do? At least I would know what to do. And she's like, fine, go be a lawyer. And I was like...
That's funny.
And I was like, no, never mind. So, yeah. Question for all of you. How were or how are emotions handled in your family? Chloe?
I would say emotions, in terms of my family, emotions weren't really handled very well. My parents would my dad would kind of maybe not talk to us, or my mom would throw a fit or something like that.
We don't really talk about emotions, I think, like I mentioned previously. It's funny because we are so used to in where we are now, we're kind of used to sharing our emotions. But I don't know if that's the same for our parents who may have grown up differently or come from different countries, experienced different things. So whenever we have this conversation, just generally with other friends and stuff, it makes me think maybe their parents also weren't as open to them. So they don't really know even how to do it with their own children, right? So that's always kind of the thing, or the thought that runs across my mind. And maybe it's up to us as kids who are now kind of understanding that this is kind of healthy to do this, to be able to do it with them, kind of in the reverse, I guess. So that's kind of one thought I had in mind. My parents do kind of show their emotion with action. So they won't tell you I love you. They'll probably do something to represent that, like cook a good meal, tuck you in at bed at night or something, you know.
打你一鑊
Exactly. Like, you know, that kind of thing. So, I mean, like, it's with action or your fists. And I didn't really learn how to talk about my emotions until my 20s. So I didn't even know it was a thing, to be quite honest with you. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know it was a normal thing to do with your family, your friends. And I think it was the first time in university, and this is a shameless plug for Across U Hub, but I'll do it anyways. It was my first time when I went to leadership camp in my 20s, and I was in a group with other people. And then it was one of those heart-to-heart sessions where we would gather, talk about things in our lives, and share our struggles, everything, right? But the problem is that, like, you don't really know these people. So then it was kind of like, why would I ever share my emotions or things that are on my mind with these people? But for some reason, they just did. And I think that was the first time I realized that, oh, wow, like, I have emotions that I can share. And it was, like, very interesting to me that we could be able to do this because I had never done that before. And I didn't know it was a thing. So I think after that moment of being able to come out and share some of the things on your mind, and it made me feel like, you know, not so alone. Like, usually when you're not able to share or experience this, it's almost like you're dealing with it alone. And it's like, wow, I'm not the only one that has these sorts of things. So it makes you feel a lot better. And I think after that experience, we went out for dinner and I started sharing with my parents. And I don't know how they felt about that because it was probably the first time I ever kind of opened up about like the good and bad things in my life. And ever since then, I've kind of enjoyed it like a lot. So I just do it now. So it's become the norm in my life. Whereas before, it was very different.
Wow. So Colin, it almost sounds like you were the one as the child who started the emotional conversations in the family.
I think it requires us as children who grew up in this generation to really almost teach our parents that sharing our emotions is okay. And that whether it be good or bad, it's just part of life, right? So we don't always have to put up like a facade to appeal to other people. But I think for them, they don't understand that because they probably grew up in a generation and culture is not really that looked upon to do that, to share with your friends and relatives and that kind of thing. So it is quite different. And I think it is our responsibility almost to teach them that because they really don't know any better sometimes.
I hear so much care and compassion and consideration from what you're sharing, Colin. Thank you.
啱啱諗起，即係 back to the movie，即係they are sort of a nuclear family, right? In Toronto, and the relatives are not usually there. 咁因為我諗下我 upbringing， 我喺香港咧，我哋同 relatives 好 close 嘅其實，and my my mom's family, the way we handle emotions are really the same. And so it's not just one parent that was living like this. It was a whole, a dozen relatives that were handling emotions in the same way. And yeah, so 係啦，我突然間覺得其實例如過到嚟，如果純粹一家幾口過到嚟咧，嗰個 impact 好似冇咁 overwhelming 啊，即係 it's not all pervasive， 而係啦，即係 whereas where I grew up it was most of my 長輩 they talk like that, they have feelings the same way. Or
Can you describe a bit of how they handled these kinds of emotions?
Oh, I was evading the question.
It didn't work.
Yeah, they were really strong. They don't show it.
What do you mean by strong?
Oh, okay. They were really tough. Is that a better word?
Like they hold in their emotions.
Yeah,
They're not.
I
It's
think
not
so.
expressed.
Poker
Yeah,
face.
they solve, they handle the issue. They don't handle the emotion.
Oh, that's okay. I get it. I get it.
And I was quite good at it too. I went through leadership camps without handling my emotions.
So you would be very good
Yeah, I
at
was-
playing poker.
Yeah. I went to similar camps as the ones you mentioned, Colin, but I could do it without handling emotions.
So I think what you're referring to here is emotional stoicism. And it's this idea that there's a lack of emotional engagement. And it's often embedded in a lot of Chinese, Canadian, Asian American families. And one perspective I've read about it is like, it often arises, this kind of emotional responding arises out of trauma. And so right now you're thinking about the families in Ukraine. They're living comfortable lives and suddenly, bam, they have to run for their survival. There's no space for emotions to be processed or expressed. You literally have to get out to save your life. And so it makes me think back, like in our own families, what traumas have they faced? What burdens have they carried such that they weren't able to share those emotions, such that they had to be locked up deep inside? And as you say, Samson, like it's your entire family. It's intergenerational. It goes on and on. So yeah, like I think we don't have some of those answers, but it is up to us to, as Colin says, to bring this back into our families.
由細到大，因為我哋 family 都會係 express 我哋 emotion 嘅人嚟嘅，即係咧媽咪唔開心，佢真係會唔開心啊，佢真係會工作好大壓力啊，或者咩啊咁啊，佢會喊啊，跟住咳啊咁啊。咁爹哋要嬲啊，要咩要發脾氣啊，要鬧咧，真係會鬧啊。所以我覺得 emotion 喺我哋屋企入邊咧都係幾即係都會成日發生，即係會發脾氣啊、嬲下啊、喊下啊咁樣嘅。所以係即係我覺得係咯，我可能因為爹哋媽咪嘅影響，所以即係佢哋都唔會話真係好 hold back 自己，即係一定有啲嘢會 hold back，唔俾我哋知，或者係去唔去expose 出嚟佢哋某啲 emotion。但係我諗 overall 嚟講，佢哋都我哋都知道佢哋 emotion 係點樣，即係佢哋都會去 express 嘅時候，咁所以我同我妹都會 express 咯，即係某程度上都會 let out 我哋嘅唔開心啊、開心啊、傷心啊呢啲嘢，所以係我覺得呢樣嘢喺我哋屋企嚟講，可能係 let out 得太多添嘅有時，因為我成日都話，我成日都同我媽講，阿媽你水做㗎，你個女我都係水做㗎，眼淺到黐線。
你意思係 let out 得太多，係咪會 uncomfortable 定係 feel frustrated？
即係可能係即係已經係慣咗喺某啲位，即係可能冇你講到你好似頭先講話，即係可能你以前你哋長輩比較理性啲，但係我就可能我哋係比較感性，即係可能嗰下就會emotion 一到咧就會喊冇先處理件事，但可能調翻轉係你哋可能會或者其他人會係處理咗件事先至去再處理佢嘅 emotion 咯。我覺得我某程度上有可能有陣時係感性係行得快過個理性咯。咁我真係唔知，即係唔知好事定壞事嘅，我諗係。
But I hear like you had like role models for showing expression in your family, and I would say I actually had the same. Like I'd say there was in our family there were big emotions that were expressed. My grandma cries a lot. And so whenever I cried as a child, I would be told, don't cry, you're just like your grandma. But I believe in the power of tears. I couldn't stop myself, frankly. And I'm grateful that my grandmother allows her tears to flow freely too. And my grandma is one of the most joyful people I know. And I believe that her connection to her emotions, both happy and sad, allow her to live with such joy and freedom. And so, it's the sense is when you feel happy, be happy. When you feel sad, be sad. And I'm grateful I grew up with that freedom to feel my emotions. So at the end of the movie, Ming, the mom, gets her her chance to really come to accept Mei for who Mei is. And she tells Mei, don't hold back for anyone. The farther you go, the prouder you'll be. And I think as a child, like that's what we need to hear from our parents, right? The fact that we are fully accepted and it's okay to go, to move on, to be different from who our parents are and to be different from who our parents want to be. And I think it's all our hopes that we will make our parents proud. So thanks again for joining us today. Visit us on Instagram, send us questions, leave feedback, offer suggestions. We value your input. And tune into our podcast for some more good times.